All right. I want to start with a story today that I've been waiting to tell you about for a couple months. Back in early February, in fact, it was, always remember, it was the day after the Super Bowl. I flew to Washington, D.C. with some friends to be a part of the National Prayer Breakfast, an event that I'd never been to before. I'll tell you about that another time. But there was a pre-event before the prayer breakfast that was called the Alliance of Virtue for the Common Good, and it was the Washington Declaration, which probably means absolutely nothing to you. It's quite a mouthful, but I want to tell you about it. It was the second event that had followed a major significant event in the Muslim world. And a bunch of Muslim leaders throughout the Middle East, North Africa, really throughout the world, in January of 2016 got together and they wrote out something called the Marrakesh Declaration. And the Marrakesh Declaration not only repudiates religious violence, but it goes so far to say that in Muslim majority countries, those countries in those places, they should protect the rights of minority religions, like Christians and Jews and Berbers, and you could go on and on. So it was just an amazing event. Listen to this. 300 of the world of Islam's top scholars, religious leaders, political leaders all got together in Marrakesh and signed this declaration together. Since then, over 50 Muslim majority countries have adopted the Marrakesh Declaration, and one by one they're turning it into law in their own country. In a sense, it's a version of our Bill of Rights to protect people from different faiths. Now, so I went to this event, and it was just extraordinary, and it was neat that I even got to be there. And part of my job was to come back and tell all of you about it, because our media is not telling the story. And maybe you're like me. Maybe you say, yeah, I know not everyone from kind of that faith is dangerous and violent, but why don't the nonviolent people do something to stop this? Well, I'm here to tell you they are, in really, really special ways. And so I got to go to this event, hear all about it, and then the second event was bringing together the three Abrahamic faiths. So Jews, Christians, and Muslims coming together to promote peace and just protection of minority faiths in our own countries and wherever we're at. And so I got to be a guest of an extravagant event. So this event was paid for by a prince from the United Arab Emirates. And then you can see behind me the guy with the white thing wrapped around his head. I don't know what it's called, but it's cool. That's Sheikh bin Yahya, who is the closest thing to the Pope in the Muslim-speaking world. And he's the president of this whole thing, and he's in charge of this organization that's promoting peace in Muslim societies. And he invited not only a bunch of Reform rabbis from the Jewish community, but he invited a number of Catholics and evangelical pastors to this event where we were there together to promote peace in our culture, in our cities, wherever that would be. My trip was paid for by a Muslim prince, and the trip was extravagant. So I get off the plane, and I'm told that there'll be a driver there to pick me up, and you never know what that means. Like a driver, like I'm showing up at an airport in Mexico or, something else. Well, this was more like 24. So the guy on the phone calls me up and says, Mr. Carlucci, I'm in a big black car out front. That's your ride. So I walk out there, and this is the nicest, biggest, blackest Mercedes-Benz I've ever seen. He gets out, loads my bag, opens the door for me, and I sit down inside, and he welcomes me, and he says, would you like to have something to eat or drink? And I'm thinking, snacks already? Where am I? This could be good. I get to this hotel. It's beautiful. It's this incredible hotel in downtown Washington, D.C. that they were hosting the event at, and we're all staying there, and we're given a bag of gifts and a number of books, and then I see my room, and it's this beautiful place, and I'm thinking, wow, this might be a fun week of work. So don't worry. I kept showing up and doing my job. You can count on me working hard for all of you. But I was there to enjoy the event. I was thinking of my wife, who was home with our 4 sons. She loves stuff like this, and she would have loved it a lot more than I did. So I was working really, really hard to enjoy it for both of us. One amazing dinner after another, hearing the story of the Muslim community trying to reform themselves, and then being open and sharing this story with Christians and Jews. It was a powerful, powerful experience. One thing struck me the first night. There was a number of people up there sharing, and one of the pastors that was there that was part of the leadership of this said, isn't it amazing that we have a number of Christian pastors here, and their trip has been paid for by a prince, Muslim prince, when in our country, in the United States, the group of people that has the lowest opinion of Muslims around the world are evangelical Christians. And of that group, evangelical pastors have the lowest opinion of all of them. And so I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, hearing the words of Jesus, love your enemies. And this person that could have seen me as an enemy was a host, an incredible host. And I was able to enjoy incredible hospitality from their culture, hospitality that we would recognize when you throw great parties, when you have people there. It was just a great, great experience. And really all my job was to be there, to be nice to people, and then come back and tell you. So I've been waiting to do that. And it fits really well today because in addition to just this message about what's happening around the world and God's using all types of people to bring about safety and peace and shalom throughout the world. I wanted to tell you that story because I was the beneficiary of incredible hospitality. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And hospitality is kind of a small thing, or at least we think of it as a small thing. But it is a gift. It's a way to actually make another person feel seen and cared for. So if you're the recipient of hospitality, you always walk away thinking that was so kind, you enjoy the gift. But here's what I want us to hear today. Hospitality is also a powerful tool that God uses to change the world. If you've journeyed with Jesus for some time, this is most likely something that you hear in your heart, okay? The seed has been planted. You have something that you want to share with other people. You begin to think about other people. You begin to think about those that don't know the Lord, that are far from God, that struggle with certain things that you think that God might be able to help them with. You begin to think about them. But one thing most of us also have in common is that we don't want to move into that space to try to help someone by being pushy or turning people into projects, right? So we live in this kind of this tough paradox of how is it that we actually make a difference? And if you read the scriptures, you hear over and over again that God is calling us into his big story to build his kingdom, and there's nothing better to do with our lives than to build what God is building. This series is meant to be a tool that we can all pick up and use to help us love the world in a way that works today, okay? So home, as Aaron described last week, we're saying it this way, home is the answer. In the midst of chaos, in the big book of Genesis, you have a murder, you have families falling apart, you have injustice, you have brokenness. God chooses a single man and a single family to move out into the world and create home for other people. That was the answer. Creating a place of belonging and connection where joy can grow and people can struggle but also grow and where love increases. That was God's answer to a broken world, is to create a family and to be a people that would create home wherever they went. So home is the answer. It's blessed to be a blessing. We're using home also as an acronym, and this is the tool that we want to begin to teach to you starting this week and for the next 4 weeks. And you can see the words behind me: hospitality, ownership, meaning, and esteem. And what we're after is being very, very generous people with these things, with other people in our lives. We think as we do this, that part of us that wants to be used in God's story will take place a little bit more. And so today I get to start with hospitality. A small thing, but a powerful thing. Here's how we're defining hospitality here at Cornerstone during this series. It is an open heart and an open door for others. An open heart and an open door for others. And the scriptures, hospitality is often defined as generosity to guests or love to strangers, okay? It includes all of that. We'll mention that in a moment. But an open heart and an open door for other people. We're going to end today's message with a practical challenge. Every message in this series is meant to move us and challenge us. And so, not every series we do here at Cornerstone is like that. Sometimes it's about us. Sometimes it's about kind of shining new light on what God is like. This series is actually about doing something, okay? And so I want you thinking that way from the very beginning, that we're going to challenge one another. And we think the best way to be challenged is with the group of people you call your family. And so that's why we're doing that here at Cornerstone. Hospitality, as defined by Kristen Puller, she describes it this way in her book, Making Room. She says, hospitality is not so much a task as it is a way of living our lives. So think of an open heart and an open door. That's a way to live our lives. Over time and practice, we can grow in hospitality, she says. which is true. Just in the same way that we grow as adults in different skills, we become better citizens, we can become better neighbors, we can grow in hospitality. And that is part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, that we are growing in the very same things that he uses and used to heal the world. So I'm going to get to just some practical ways that we can use hospitality in a moment, but I just want to spend a few minutes describing it a little more. Okay? I know we don't need a lot of description of hospitality because we have a sense of what it is. But I want to describe it the way Jesus modeled it, okay? So first of all, hospitality is about creatively making room for another person or for other people. Creatively making room for another. Now, the reason I'm using creative, I know it's not up on the screen, is because the way hospitality will look for you as opposed to the way it looks for me is different. At our home, we have, Elise and I are there, and we have our 4 sons. And so our house, kind of in the neighborhood, is like little boy hangout, okay? There are a lot of Legos. There's a lot of swords and guns down in the basement, lots of things to hit each other with and shoot each other with. And we have lots of balls, footballs, soccer balls, handballs, everything that you could describe, my boys have it. So they like hanging out there. So a big part of hospitality for the Carluccis right now is welcoming in and creating space for these little boys that are friends with my sons. It looks different for you, though, right? And we need to learn to be creative because it's not just about throwing big parties. This isn't just an expression of someone who's an extrovert. Hospitality and creatively making room for someone else can just look like an invitation into a group of friends. Time out for coffee, a walk together, or it could be a dinner party. Whatever it would need to be, hospitality looks different for different people. So it could be a literal open door to dinner, time to listen to a coworker. You open up your office door and give them space and time, but it's creating space for them. After you do this, hospitality, as Jesus modeled it, was about sharing something authentic. Think of authentic this way, something that is true to you and to them. No one likes pretend. No one likes it when someone is trying to be something they're not, right? The same is true when we are showing hospitality to other people. We are meant to just share something authentic. So it can be small, a meal, glass of wine, a beer over happy hour, a walk, exercise. You're sharing something authentic to both of you and not working really, really hard to try to impress the other person. A handshake can be authentic. A conversation can be authentic. But the point of hospitality is to share the moment with the other person or with the people around you. And so as you're there, you're not working to impress, but you're working to share something together. So you make space for the other, you share something authentic. And then the third thing is hospitality as modeled by Jesus was always about, okay, and it was about many other things, but Jesus always did this. He always enjoyed the person. He made them feel seen and honored because he made it about them. Jesus would slow down. He would let this crazy pace of life stop, even just for a moment, to slow down, to hear the person, to see the person, and to enjoy them, which is really interesting, that he enjoyed people more than anyone else, and he was the one person that knew everything about everyone else, right? Because there's a part of us that's like, no one would ever enjoy me if they really knew me. So in hospitality, we slow down, and we enjoy the person. And so this is a reminder that we do not turn people into projects, okay? It's not that we're having someone in our home so that we can get on to something later, the important things. No, the important thing is to share something authentic and to enjoy the person. Inside of every person is a grace and a gift and an amazing story that God has placed in them. And they're image bearers of God. And so when we stop to just enjoy the people around us, guess what happens? You give them the gift of presence. And we live in a world today that's so cold and calculated, and there's always a return on the investment. And so when we stop and just make it about the person, guess what? People pick up on it. And they feel loved, cared for. Hospitality is a small thing, but it is a powerful thing. So we need to be reminded to not turn people into projects. And I want to read you a quote by Henry Nouwen that describes this really well. It helps to know a little bit about Nouwen, so I'll just say this. He was a Catholic priest, theologian, professor, taught at Yale, Harvard, Notre Dame, really smart guy. But the last 10 years of his life, he lived in a community with disabled adults where they lived together, made home for one another, and cared for one another. And this community that he was a part of is one of the reasons what they did, the world learned from. And it's one of the reasons we treat our adults with disabilities differently than we used to. It used to be a really sad, sad story. But today there's a lot of hope because they live and they contribute and they give from one another. So he went to live with this community. And I want to read you how he describes hospitality. It's a little long, so stay with me. But it's a great quote. This is Henry Nouwen. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom not disturbed by dividing lines. It is not to lead our neighbor into a corner where there are no alternatives left, but to open wide a spectrum of options for choice and commitment. It is not an educated intimidation with good books, good stories, good works, but listen to this, but rather the liberation of fearful hearts, so that words can find root and bear ample fruit. It's not a method of making our God and our way into the criteria of happiness, but the opening of an opportunity to others to find God their own way. The paradox of hospitality is that it wants to create emptiness, not a fearful emptiness, but a friendly emptiness where strangers can enter and discover themselves as created free to sing their own songs, speak their own languages, dance their own dances, free also to leave and follow their own vocations. Hospitality is not a subtle invitation to adopt the lifestyle of the host, but the gift of a chance for the guests to find their own. When you read the stories of Jesus, isn't that what he did? The hospitality created the space. It was an opportunity for people to grow more and more into who they were. Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 9, says, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves, and never be lacking in zeal, but keep up your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people as they have need. And then it says, practice hospitality. I like that it's the word practice, which means it's something you return to. Over and over, you return to it. So we create space for people. We share something authentic, and we enjoy the people around us. When this happens, there in that space, there is room for something special to occur. Now, let me mention a few places and a few people we do this with. So the first, you can't talk about hospitality if you're using the scriptures and not talk about being hospitable to the stranger or to the person that has no home. So over and over again in the scriptures, we're told to turn our attention to those that suffer, those that struggle, the marginalized around us. And this goes all the way back to Leviticus chapter 19. When God had pulled the nation of Israel out of slavery, he was trying to teach them new things. And so he gave them this passage. You can see it behind me where he says, I don't want you to forget the stranger or the foreigner or the alien or the immigrant, those that have no home. Remember, home's the answer. They have no home. They don't have a people to be theirs, where safety and love and joy can grow. It says, remember them. Why? Because, remember, at a time, you were once a stranger, and I received you. See, this is the part of hospitality that we always have to return to. There will always be a reason why you will not, you, all of us will not be generous with making room for other people. There's lots of reasons why. We're busy. Our house looks like crap. We don't have what everyone else does. There's always a reason. There's always a reason. God knew that, and he said, I want you to remember the hospitality of God towards you. And isn't one of the neat things that we love about Jesus, and this is part of the gospel, that he has an open heart and an open door to everyone all the time? An open heart and an open door. So we show this towards strangers. That's one reason we have a refugee ministry here at Cornerstone. They're not strangers anymore, but we literally help bring over 50 strangers to help care for them, so that they could build a sense of home here. The book of Ruth, if you want a great story about welcoming the stranger and the impact that can have, is one of the classic stories in the Bible. The great, I could add many more greats, grandmother of Jesus, her life was saved because of the hospitality not only that she showed to her mother-in-law, but also the hospitality a generous man named Boaz showed to her. Hospitality saved a family. I can think of Jesus as a little boy having that story in his Bible, his mom and dad saying, this is our family. I want you to remember the hospitality of Boaz. Look what it did. It was a small thing, but it was a powerful thing. Jesus and his siblings held on to that story, I can imagine. One of my favorite churches in America is a church in Brooklyn, New York called Plymouth Church of the Pilgrims. I've mentioned them a few times. I'll just tell you a few things about them. Before the Emancipation Proclamation, they would send people down to the slave states, and they would bring children who were in slavery up to their church. And on Sundays, after they would go through the service, they'd take a special offering, and they would purchase the freedom of children in their service. Amazing. It was a hiding place for the Underground Railroad. It was even illegal, even in Brooklyn, to hide runaway slaves at the time, but they would hide them. This was a church that was willing to go to extremes to make room for the stranger. And so you can read about things like Beecher Bibles, which were guns sent to Kansas to stop the spread of slavery. But what they did over and over again is they kept making room. I stood in a room, which was the second room that they built, which is one reason, churches add space, is they add space for more people. There was a room where every night they would educate and entertain and feed dock workers, poor Irish immigrants who had no place to go. They created space for them. I say it's one of my favorite churches. It's one of my favorite churches in the way that they used to be. They've lost all that now. To them, now it's about how nice their building is and living the comfortable Brooklyn life. They've lost their call. But it's an amazing place, and that's the kind of people that we want to be. Open, sharing our hearts in an open door to strangers. The second thing I want to talk about is about our own homes, okay? I want us to think about our homes, the place that you live. You literally sleep as a tool. Often we don't think of the home that we live in or the space that we have as a tool that God can use, but it is. We live in a culture today that loves its privacy, don't we? Like my time away. My home is my castle. This is where I go and I rest. And often people don't get invited into that space, but because of that, it creates an incredible opportunity that when you invite someone into your space, it's special because not a lot of people do it. Your home is a reflection of you. Even if you live with a bunch of dudes, okay? When I was in college, I lived in a house with a bunch of guys, and you can just imagine what that house looked like and smelled like. We always had people in our home. It was a tool. Today, my house is a little nicer than that. We get to have people in our home. It's a tool. And when we let them in, we're giving them a glimpse into our space. We're creatively making space for them. I have a bunch of neighbors. I wonder what's happening behind those walls. I'd love to be invited in. It's like this mystery, right? The forbidden land, someone else's house. But because of all that, it's a tool you can use to love people. There's a Jewish saying that kind of keeps evolving as time goes on, and this is how I remembered it recently. It says, the home is the new temple, and the table is the new altar. Home is special. It is sacred. And so it is a gift when people are invited in, and it is a powerful tool that we can express hospitality with. If you want a biblical example, you can look at Deborah in the book of Acts. She invited people into her home. It was the first gathering of a church in that city. They met in homes. She opened her space. It was probably an inconvenience to her, but she was generous with hospitality. Now, let me just say one more thing about our homes. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be Joanna Gaines, okay, to have people into your house. You don't have to be like a Pinterest champion. And today, like, motherhood is a combat sport, like trying to keep up with everyone else. You don't have to do that. You don't have to have it be about you at all, where you're showing people how you live. It's not about impressing others. It's about sharing something authentic and enjoying other people. What you have, you can use. And there will always be excuses of what we don't have. But God always tells us, pay attention to what you do have and use it. Okay? So our homes are another place we can be creative in creating space for others. And then lastly, I do want to talk about what it's like for us as a church family as we gather here on Sundays or for different events or small groups that meet throughout the week, which we have lots of them, what it looks like for us to show hospitality together. All right, let me start this way. So back in the fall, I felt like the Lord was saying, hey, this is a special part of Cornerstone. It's a warm community. Maybe our room contributes to that we're all so close. It's not spread out and impersonal, but it's a warm community. And I felt like the Lord said, I'm asking him all the time, how is it that we can be more effective in caring for and reaching our city? I ask him that all the time. And I felt like one of the things he said is get better at the thing you're already pretty good at. You're warm, you're open, the people are fantastic, which is true. I don't love being a pastor, but I love being this group of people's pastor because I just feel like we have a special group. You're doing amazing things. Talented. Thank you. But I felt like he said, push them to make more room. Push them to help people connect to joy, and joy comes from knowing that someone sees them, is glad to be with them, and that they mean something to someone else. See, that's home, right? That's home language. Push them. And so in January, we started having discussions as a staff that were framed this way. I brought this question to our staff. I said, what would it look like if a Sunday at Cornerstone became the most hospitable environment anyone could enter into during the week? I mean, wouldn't that be a good goal? Like people feel really seen, really welcome, not in like an aggressive way. Oh, visitors. No one wants that. I know all of you, and I don't want you even doing that to me, all right? But what if there's just room to be yourself? What if we were one of the most hospitable group of people that anyone could ever know? Every week, we have visitors, and we have some today that are here. And some people, when you go to a new church, it's a challenge the first time you show up. I mean, it's just a challenge to go to anything new. It's intimidating. But for some people, it's more than that. They walk in, and the whole time they're thinking, even before they come, and often this question stops them, but when they're here, they're wondering the whole time, can a person like me come here? Is there room for a person like me? And then they could go on to describe themselves different ways. Is there room for someone like me? Could I be like them? Is there things that we could share? Can we enjoy one another? Is there space for someone like me here? Let me tell you just a few things I heard in the last month when it comes to this question of hospitality and is there room for other people here? Okay, so a few weeks ago, I was asked a question. Are gay people welcome at Cornerstone? The same week, it was Easter Sunday, we had some Muslims here. Some Muslim students came to our Easter services, and someone said, are Muslims welcome here? Later on that week, I had someone who's going through a divorce say, hey, am I welcome here now that this divorce is happening? Am I welcome here? Are they welcome here? And the answer to every one of those questions is yes, yes, yes. In fact, I'd love to know when you feel unwelcome so we can stop it. Because we're people, though, that we don't always give our hearts to this. There are times when people come and they don't feel welcome. They feel judged. They feel hurt. There's no space for them. They answer the question like, nah, this can't be a place for me. So when asking the staff the question, how do we turn this into the most hospitable place that we can make it? You know what the answer is? It's something that we all must do and own together. What if on a Sunday morning, Sunday night, before you show up here, you were to just kind of dial in on this idea of hospitality and say, you know what, there's going to be people asking themselves the question, is this a place for me? What if you would be a part of the answer saying yes? What if every week you came ready to give an open heart and an open door to other people? Do you think that small thing might be a big thing? I think absolutely. Our staff had some assignments. We went and visited different places and observed hospitality, what it doesn't look like. I got to fly on Frontier Airlines and was reminded what hospitality doesn't look like. We went on a field trip. We went to New Belgium Brewery in Fort Collins. Not because everyone loves beer, although some of us do. But because they take you on this tour and they're generous and they're open and they're hospitable, and by the time you're done with the tour, you feel like you're a part of their story. I'm going to run through the wall for this place. And all they're doing is making beer. It's the power of hospitality, though. And so we went and we learned. But we're now bringing it to you. We need your help in making this place like that. I got this note in February from a guy named Rob, and the title of the email said, "Thank you." I don't have time actually to read the whole thing. I'll just tell you what he said. That day, he picked up a homeless man named Jimmy in downtown Boulder. And Rob was in the military, and he knew that as he moved around, the church was often a place where he could experience family and care. So he had a good experience, which was neat, hospitality of other people. And so he thought about bringing Jimmy here. So the first Sunday Rob ever came to Cornerstone, he brings a homeless man. And he wanted me to thank all of you, he said, Cornerstone Church, for how open and hospitable you were. Many of you that day shared your heart, and you shared an open door with him. And this is how he closes out. After describing they're getting ready to leave, and someone kind of met him in the hall and welcomed him back in to have more coffee and bagels and popcorn. And Jimmy loved the popcorn. I mean, who doesn't? Except the custodian. He hates the popcorn. But he came back in and had a warm place to be for a few more hours, and he was cared for. And he wanted to say thank you. He said, "I met this man earlier that day, and I took him to a church that I had never been before. And again, I want to thank you and your congregation for the warmth and welcome in inviting us in and sharing love toward Jimmy in particular." Authentic things were shared that day. He slept through my entire message, by the way, which was awesome. We gave him a place to take a nap. He's one of many who sleeps through my messages, but I did notice him that day. Open heart, open door is a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool. Worship team, you guys come on out. I'm going to end by drawing our attention to this card. So if you have it, grab it. If you need one, raise your hand, and our ushers will bring you one. I told you at the beginning that this series is about a challenge. It is about movement. And, one of my favorite roles in life is being a coach. And what I love about being a coach is you build a sense of family for your team. So I coach a bunch of young men. Thank you, Sean. And I love building family with those guys. But one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to accomplish something bigger than ourselves, okay? We're a team. Do you know that? We're not just a family. We are a team that exists for those that are not a part of this team. Okay, just think about that for a moment. Part of the reason we even exist is for those that aren't a part of our team. So what you do with a team, though, is you challenge everybody together. And there's something special about doing something together. Okay? So, on your card, who is one person that I can show hospitality to this week? Remember, you can be creative. You don't have to throw a big party. Maybe it's just someone at work. Maybe it's inviting them into a group of friends that you have. It's already a rich group of friends, rich in relationships. You can share that with others. I want you to write down that name. And then second, what's an invitation that you could extend to them this week? And so it's not just about thinking good thoughts. This really is about action. This day is about what happens outside of here. Okay? This message is about all of that. And so as you kind of just reflect and open yourself up, let God give you a name. As we sing and worship, I want you to just write down that name. If you have some insight about what the invitation is, I want you to write it down. And then I'm going to come back up and I'm going to bless whatever it is that we've written down together. So let's stand together. John, you can bring down the lights. Father, I pray that you would speak to us right now. There are many reasons why we cannot move towards others. There's always reasons. But I pray that we would hear your voice that offers us hospitality and says, give it to others, is a powerful tool. So speak to us now, Lord. In Jesus' name.